Very interesting period for the Indian economy, because this is the time when we got complete freedom. Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, very effective factor. 1950 to 1990 scenario. What was our ideology? When India wanted to emphasize on the factor that public sector should be given, the Planning Commission was set up under the visionary of our Prime Minister as its chairperson. Good morning and welcome to the first session on Chapter 2, Indian Economy 1950 to 1990. Very interesting period for the Indian economy, because this is the time when we got complete freedom, the economic independence, and then we started making a progress towards the development of the nation. So let us have a quick look into the topics that we are going to see for today. These are the topics that we are seeing: introduction, the leadership matters, Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, very effective factor. The goals of 5-year plans, that's very important for us, because that is the base for any planning methodology altogether. Modernization, self-reliance. We are still talking about self-reliance even at the present context today. So these are the important factors that change the Indian economy scenario altogether. So let's move forward and try to understand each one of them in detail. Now, the first thing, introduction in terms of the 1950 to 1990 scenario. What was our ideology? We are out in terms of the independence, the physical independence from the British. We were out from the clutches of the British rule. Now we are an economically freedom-oriented country. We are a free country. We wanted to develop, and the rapid pace of development was there inside every single Indian. So the first objective that we had in our mind is that the goals of the 5-year plan. We want to set an agenda. Every 5 years, the country will make an economic progress. That will be recorded. That will be set as a benchmark, and then we will start progressing from there every 5 years onward. So that was our first initiative taken up by the government. The second factor, to understand the developmental policies in various sectors, including agriculture, from 1950 to 1990. So we are going to understand the different factors, the different policies that have been taken place in the year 1950 to 1990. And we need to learn to think about the merits and limitations of a regulated economy. This word is very important, the word called as regulated economy, because going forward, we are not an economy that is going to be guided, that is going to be arrested, or that is going to be left as a momentum. This is going to be a regulated economy, an economy that is built on policies and regulations altogether. So moving forward, the leadership issue. India was a country that has seen n number of leaders. All the leaders were one who wanted India to develop in their own sense. Starting from our great Mahatma Gandhi ji, the father of nation, to Nehru, to Subhash Chandra Bose, you can probably list out the n number of leaders that India has seen who had struggled for our country in terms of getting freedom, in terms of laying a visionary map altogether. The leadership issue in India was not just about becoming the Prime Minister or President, but the leadership issue was in terms of taking India to the next level, to the next economic development process altogether. To understand that, the independent India, when I'm going to use this word, independent India, I'm talking about a scenario post-1950, not just 1947. 1947, we declared ourselves as an independent nation. But 1950 onwards, we became a republic, and then we started thinking about our economic progress. So that was a type when we wanted to think that what kind of economic system should be in place. What should be our ideology altogether? Should India still be a country trying to follow the westernization? Should India be a country like Russia, follow the communism? Or should India be a country which can be socialistic in nature? Should India be a country which is unique in terms of thinking, unique in terms of coming up as a developed nation altogether? To answer to all these questions, the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, was the first person to ever come up and give out a very, very beautiful theory called as the socialistic approach towards the economy. So the word socialistic is very, very important for us. Why? Because our Prime Minister had thought about this. They were the people who were wanted to understand that India should have an inclusive growth and not an exclusive growth. Now, what do you mean by an inclusive growth? Nehru had understood that India is a country which has got hundreds and thousands of people living from different culture, from different background, from different ethnicity, origin, everything altogether. So you need to include everybody as a part of growth and development. You cannot be racist, you cannot be prejudiced in terms of taking up a policy. You need to understand that everybody has to get benefited. So the idea of our first Prime Minister was to make India a socialistic approach, include all the best elements from different practices and put it together as a new element, and so that we would start following that policy and we would start building up our economic independence and growth altogether. So the other factor was that when India wanted to be a socialistic society with a strong public sector, I want you to please understand the meaning of public sector. The reason here is that when India wanted to emphasize on the factor that public sector should be given higher priority, which means government jobs, government related organization should be promoted. The reason was that the government wanted everybody to give equal employment. Because if you look into a private organization, the recruitment and selection are not independent, are not something that will happen every year, are not something that could be done at will and wish, are not something where they will try to give jobs to everybody. Because the private organizations have their own set of requirements, but the public sector is one which will try to give job to each and every person, to each and every citizen of the country, where it becomes their right to apply, and if they are selected, they would also be given all the benefits, all the facilities of every single government employee. So the aim of the Indian government was to see that promote the public sector, by which you will also generate employment and by which our country will become more socialistic in nature. So that was the reason why we tried to put a thrust on the public sector altogether. Now, we also wanted to understand about the concept of private and the democracy altogether, because we are a democratic nation. We believe that every citizen in this country has their rights, have their own ideology, and they have their own principles. Nobody can stop them, nobody can force them to follow anything. So in that segment, in that factor, what we wanted is that the government and the private sector should participate freely for the development of the society, for the development of the system altogether. So that is why we always thought that the economic growth is possible with the inclusion of private as well as the government sector altogether. Probably this factor is what today we are thinking about. This is the factor what I would like to say as P, P and P, which is called as public-private partnership. This concept was taught by our great Prime Minister years ago. In 1950 itself, 70 years back itself, we had thought about this model and we wanted India to come up in this model. So that is why the economy was trying to encourage the government sector, followed by the private sector altogether. So that's what you will be able to see here. They are being encouraged to be a part of the plan effort. So private sector was also encouraged with the government in order to make an economic progress to the nation. Moving forward, now we are also going to understand the industrial policy resolution of 1948, just 2 years before when we became republic and democratic nation altogether, we had an industrial policy resolution of 1948. Now, what was this trying to say? And it was a directive principle, part of the Indian Constitution on this outlook. The Planning Commission was set up under the visionary of our Prime Minister as its chairperson. So the Planning Commission was set up, which is a very, very important and constituent body of our system. And that system tried to understand that every 5 years we will set an objective and we will start progressing towards economic growth and development. So it was a fantastic era for us because we are going to begin something new. We also came up with the factor that a planning commission, an independent body that would be set under the direct guidance of the Prime Minister and the elected members of the planning commission who are selected by the Prime Minister, will guide India to move further in terms of prosperity and growth altogether. So they were the people who were expert in their own line, probably from sociology, from economics, from education, from banking, from financial sector. All the people were a part of this planning commission, and each one of this commission's ideology was to understand and make a very good economic plan for the growth of the country. We were also going to see about how the plan should have been planned and what is the ideology altogether. The goals of the 5-year plan, a very, very important concept, because the goals of the 5-year plan are the benchmark, are the systematic plans that have been laid down by the government of India in order to understand the progress. So let us undergo a complete ideology, a complete understanding of how the 5-year plans were set. A plan should have some clearly specified goals. So the first ideology here itself in the 5-year plan was that we had a goal in our mind. We had set it up in the mind that we wanted to improve, we wanted to progress, we wanted to make India a developed nation. So our goal here was development. Our goal here was not anything else. We did not want to make money. We did not want to compete against anybody. We did not want ourselves in the world ranking situation. But we wanted ourselves to be a developed nation. We wanted ourselves to create an identity saying that India could be a self-reliant country which could develop under any situations and provides its citizens the best of the facilities and benefits so that the country can progress at any point of time. Secondly, the goals of the 5-year plans are growth, modernization, self-reliance, and equity. Now look at the ideology itself, the objectives itself. The first objective is growth, followed by modernization, self-reliance, and equity. We are going to learn about these terms individually in the coming sessions. But just to give you a bird's eye view to this, growth, everybody as a citizen of this country wants to grow financially, morally, independently in terms of becoming to the next level. So the growth of the country is very, very important. You cannot make a country stagnate in terms of growth. You have to find out ways by which a country can make progress level by level. It doesn't mean that the country has to make a rapid transformation overnight, but if the country has to make an effort so that they keep on improving from the previous year. So growth was in the mind. Growth was the first principle of the 5-year plan. Second one, modernization. Right from the time when we got freedom from the British, we wanted India to be a modern country. A modern country means with all amenities, with all benefits, with all facilities. We never wanted India to look back as a Stone Age country. We wanted the best in terms of communication, transport, infrastructure, banking and finance, chemical, manufacturing, agriculture, you name the sector, we wanted ourselves to be presented as the most modern country possible. So the aim, the ambition, the ideology was to make our country a modern country equal to any other country in the world, not just comparison but laying down a benchmark and saying that we are the best country in the world. Next factor, self-reliance. India wanted to be independent not just physically but also independent in terms of the resource management, independent in terms of the economic development also. Today, if you go back and start understanding the concept of self-reliance, the most interesting part of self-reliance is that we wanted to be a nation who could stand on our foot by ourselves, and we wanted to be governed by us. We never wanted people to depend on any country for any kind of reasons, for any kind of activities, or for any kind of dimensions altogether. We are a country, we believe that we have the talent, we have the abilities, and we have the visionary to lead and make a progress altogether. So that is why self-reliance was one of the primary mottos in terms of our planning. And then equity, we believe that everybody should get an equal share of the progress. Now, when a country makes progress, when a country makes revenue, when a country starts growing from the base level to that to a higher origin altogether, we want everybody to be a partner of success. We want everybody to have the lion's share in terms of enjoying the success. It might not be just revenue, but it might be also about growth. It might be also about freedom. It might be also about those privileges and rights that we are talking about. So in every 5-year plan, we wanted equity as a central part of the theme. We wanted everybody to equally participate and get equally benefited. India is one country which is known for its tolerance in terms of religion, in terms of language, in terms of ethnicity, values and principles. We have never tried to ignore any people, we have never tried to ignore any sector, or we have never tried to inhale the dictatorship quality within us. We have always believed that we are a socialistic country, and we want everybody to be a part of this journey, and we want everybody to enjoy the success altogether. The next part is that we also meant that the plans would have been given equal importance to all this goal. Why? Because this does not mean that all the plans have been given equal importance. Why this is coming into picture is, there are some times when you would have seen that the ideology might have changed, in the sense today when we talk about the services sector, that is post 1991, which we will be discussing, probably there was a shift in thinking, but then we did not move away from the core values. We always kept the core values in mind, and then we started making a progress altogether. Now moving forward, growth. What does growth refers to? Growth refers to an increase in the country's capacity to produce the output of goods and services within the country. Now we are talking growth in terms of production. Can we grow as a country? Can we grow as a personality? Can we grow as a system which is able to produce more and more? The answer to that was yes, because we had the capacity to produce, we had the capacity to develop, and we had the knowledge of how to produce. So we wanted the country to grow in terms of capacity. We wanted that volume numbers to come out and tell to people that yes, India can also produce in that huge capacity. India can also meet the demands and the requirements of the people. So growth was a very, very important concept altogether. It implies that either a large stock of the productive capital or a larger side of the supporting services like transport and banking, an increase in its efficiency or productive capital and services. Now, growth is not something that can happen exclusively. Growth is not something that you would see that it happens all of a sudden. It is being aided by a lot of factors like transport, like finance, labor, land, so many factors that comes into picture, because growth is something that can be seen only when the factors of production come into picture. The factors of production according to economics is land, labor and capital. So all the factors have to be imbibed into the system, and then growth can happen altogether. So that is why growth is not an exclusive era, growth is not an exclusive talk. Growth is always including the people, including the system, the technology, the process, the government, everybody comes into picture, and then only growth happens altogether. Now moving forward, We also try to understand in terms of the growth factor, what is the indicators that are needed for growth. A good indicator for economic growth is none other than the GDP. Now, GDP is something that is always spoken across in any of the newspaper, any of the channel, or any of the business talk altogether, the gross domestic product, which tries to talk about the export capability, the production capability, the growth capability of a nation. So that is why GDP is the market value of all goods and services produced in the country during the year, because it is very, very important. It tries to tell, it tries to talk about the factor that, all the goods, all the factors that are being produced, that are being done within the country are being found there. They are there. They are being created, and that's the market value you need to understand. So within a year, let's say that in 1 year, if you are able to produce some 50,000 worth goods, some 1 lakh rupees worth good, now that will directly constitute your GDP. That will directly try to tell you that these are the factors on which the GDP is growing, the GDP is getting enhanced altogether. So the GDP of a country is derived from different sectors of the economy, no doubt about it. In India, we have about 8 core sectors. So all the 8 core sectors with 12 more allied sectors try to contribute to the GDP of the country, which means the GDP is a composition of 20 odd sectors which try to make the nation a progressive nation altogether. So GDP cannot be just written down by few names or by few words. It involves a lot of process where the country puts an effort to manufacture at its best and start exporting more. So that is where you would see the investment, the income, and all the government factors coming inside in terms of promoting the nation to the next level. The contribution made by each of these sectors makes up the structural composition of the economy. So GDP is the backbone of the country. The GDP's composition, the structural outlook of GDP is being given by each one of these sectors. Each one of these sectors are like the parts of human body. So any part of the human body is equally important. So similarly, every single sector of the economy is equally important in order to make the GDP the most effective one. So that is why whenever we look into the structural composition of GDP, we need to understand from our mindset that this is going to make a huge difference. This is going to make a huge factor altogether. Moving forward, we're going to talk about modernization. Now, this is a very, very interesting topic, the second value that we were talking about in the 5-year plan. Now, what is modernization? In order to increase the production, in order to make our country grow, you need to have the best of the things in terms of technology, in terms of people, in terms of value, and in terms of growth. Modernization is not about the gadgets. Modernization is not just about the equipment, but modernization is also about the thoughts. If you want to grow, if you want to increase your production, if you want to reach the next league, that means you have to start thinking at that level. So in order to increase the production of goods and services, we need new technology, we need a new thinking altogether. Now, if in our agriculture sector, if we have just believed the factor that a farmer will just produce 100 tons of rice and that is enough for us, then that is not modernization. Why? Because we are just letting the farmer do his job. But then, in the concept of modernization, we need to make the farmer think, how can he increase this 100 tons to 1000 tons using the better means of production, which means you are making the farmer also grow, and in turn you are also increasing the output capacity of the country. So that is where modernization comes. It means that you are involving the nation in each and every step towards progress. It is a visionary level thinking, and that's very, very important for any progress to happen. So that is why when I say the farmer increases the output, it is a matter of fact that it comes at the back of your mind. How can the farmer come? How can the farmer start building it all together? Now, similarly, a factory, if you are going to look here, can increase the output by using a new type of machine. So adoption to new technology. Today, if you look at Maruti Suzuki, or if you look at Tata Motors, or you look at any Indian company, all these companies have tried to adopt their best methodology in terms of producing for the country. They have done the best technology adoption so that they can increase their car capacity production, and they will be able to see that the growth is happening at a constant basis altogether. That is why it is very, very important in order to understand the modernization period altogether. Now let's move forward. However, modernization does not refer only to the use of new technology. As I told you, we are not just going to stop with the gadgets, but also the changes in the social outlook, such as recognition that women should also have the same rights as men. Now, economics also try to understand and address the gender bias. Why? Because in a country like India, where we talk about 40% of women ratio, now let's try to understand that in a society where we live, we have about 60% men and 40% women. Now, if the ratios are going to change upside down, let's not worry about the ratios here, but what we are really worried is that every man is equal to a woman and every woman is equal to a man. So that means we want equality at any point of time. Only when men and women together contribute for the nation development, then there will be a progress. If you start bringing in gender bias, and if you start saying that only men should work and women should not work, then that will be considered to be a very big negative system altogether. If you look at any of the developed nations, you will be able to see that there are factors, there are governance, there are methods by which women are given higher importance or equal importance. That is one of the reasons where you would see modernization picking up, because your social change factors are moving, and it is coming up to that level where you are able to see that growth and development is happening, and that's a very, very fantastic thing to happen. And that's the most important thing also. When we brought in the 33% reservation factor altogether, we were able to see that somewhere down the lane we wanted women to also occupy places as what men are, both in the corporate sector as well as in the public sector. And that is why India is one among those countries which has respected women and given them equal status in most of the jobs, in most of the situations as far as together. So that is why we believe that a combination of traditionality with the modern outlook, where we can provide men and women an equal employment opportunity, will automatically boost the income of the country, thereby helping the GDP to move forward. So that is why we were always targeting 100% employment basis, where every woman, where every man can get a job and the country's GDP can move forward. Now, to the next slide. Self-reliance. This word, what we are now talking about, the Atmanirbhar, was spoken by our leaders 70 years back. So self-reliance is not a new concept for us. Self-reliance is not something that has been seen here. Self-reliance is something that we have been intake as a part of our system altogether. Self-reliance is something that we have been breathing, we have been living all together. So that's why self-reliance is something in India that we have been trying to practice and preach to almost every country in the world. So when we say self-reliance, we also say that that is the way how you can start promoting the economic growth altogether. Now, the concept of economic growth is very, very important. Why? Because now when you start looking at the economic growth, that too when you are able to do it using your own resources, it is even more realistic, it is even more powerful, because now you have become a country who was not dependent on any other factors, but you are just dependent on your skill, on your talent, and on your intellectual capacity. So that means now you have become a developed nation. You know the routes, you know the pathway, you know the way how to take it forward, and you will be able to come forward with the best levels possible. So this is how we call self-reliance as the most important part of the economic development. The first 5-year plan, that means the first 7 into 5, 35 years, what we had tried to do is that we had tried to give importance to self-reliance, by where we wanted to bring in the development of the industry, trying to avoid the imports. We never wanted a China, we never wanted an America or a Japan to send their goods to our country, because we always felt that we are good by ourselves. We can manufacture. Let us allow the Indian industries to explore their talent. Let us allow the Indian industries to manufacture and let those goods be consumed by us. But unfortunately, somewhere down the lane, we were carried away by the imports and exports philosophy and we lost it. But then, not to worry, after 2014, when the Make in India slogan again started hitting to the minds of the people, we understood it very, very clearly. We understood it to the last word very clearly, that we are going to be the self-reliant country. We are going to be an example to the world in terms of creating a world-class manufacturing hub, in terms of making India the most economically viable nation altogether. So that is why the policy of self-reliance is highly important. It's highly guided altogether, and that requires at this juncture especially. Why? Because if we want to go further, if we want to make an economic progress, self-reliance has to be inbuilt. So this is why it was considered to be a necessity, and the dependence on foreign country has to be reduced. Then only self-reliance can be promoted altogether. Moving forward, it is an understandable factor that people who were recently freed from the foreign domination should be given importance to self-reliance. Now, why I am bringing this context to the modern situation altogether is that, remember the year 96-98, that was the time period in India when mobile phones first started coming to India. We did not have an Indian mobile manufacturer. But after 2000-2001, India started understanding the importance of telecommunication market. So we were the people who first started building in the components, and we wanted to also come into the factor that where we could also become a semiconductor market, a mobile manufacturing market. Slowly, the foreign companies started establishing their base in India, and India started becoming the second manufacturing base next only to China. So that is where I'm trying to relate this concept. It is understandable people who were recently freed from the foreign domination. The dependence factor moved away and India became a manufacturing hub. We decided that, at some point down the lane, we want to go away from the British and we want to be India, made in India, made for India. So that is the concept that started setting inside the mind of the people, and that became highly important. That became highly factorable, because that is what we wanted to do as a part of self-reliance. Further, it was feared that the dependence of imported food supplies, because if that foreign technology, if that food supply and technology was bought inside the country altogether, then what will happen? Then what will go through is that the Indian country sovereignty, that is in terms of India's ideology, India's identity, will be lost. We will become a country which will be branded by foreign products and foreign companies, and we will not have our own identity. So the concept of self-reliance itself was highly important for all of us, because self-reliance is the only way of establishing the brand identity in our country. So that is how we started becoming a country of our own altogether. This is very important for all of us to know, because that is where India has made a great economic progress. With this, we come to the conclusion of the first session. I hope and believe that this session was highly interesting and useful, with information, a lot of things packed together. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful session. In the next session, we will be talking about the various economic progress in terms of the 5-year plan, the growth, and the other factors. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today.